Hi, everyone. My name is Joey Holbert, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Washington State University. I'm supported by the USDA, and I'm leading a program called the Forest Health Watch, where we're engaging communities in research about tree health. Our first project's about western red cedar dieback that we're seeing throughout the region. And I'm recording this and presenting today a storyboard from Tableau Public that I created for the Urban Ecosystem Research Consortium in the 2021 symposium. So thanks for taking the time to join me for this video. I'm going to walk you through this idea where we want to explore the dieback of red cedar as a symbol for the inequities in some of the urban communities. And we have this question: can the dieback of western red cedar be a symbol to raise awareness about the consequences of climate change? And can it be a symbol about the inequities in urban landscapes? And I've embedded this Tableau project in our website. And you can find more information at foresthealth.org. And this is embedded on the subdomain or the page equity. So unfortunately, throughout the region, we're seeing a lot of dieback in western red cedar, and this is really a tragedy because it's a really important component of the cultural legacy in the Northwest. And with that, I just want to acknowledge that I'm really privileged to be working on this species that has such a rich cultural kind of use and value. And I want to mention that I'm coming to you from the indigenous lands of the Coast Salish people, and that a lot of the studying and learning that I'm doing is taking place on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe of Indians specifically. So I'm based at Washington State University at a research and extension center in Puyallup, Washington. But so western red cedar is a critically important species to conserve in the Northwest, one, because of the cultural value that I mentioned, but also because it's an important part of our industrial heritage and forestry in the Northwest. And in a lot of places you go, it's almost the dominant species in a lot of these ecosystems. But unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of dieback, and there's this general consensus that it's connected or linked to the longer and hotter droughts that we're experiencing in recent summers in the Northwest. And to illustrate the data, there's some aerial survey data that's available. Aerial surveys conducted by Oregon Department of Forestry, Washington Department of Natural Resources in coordination with the U.S. Forest Service, Forest Health and Protection. Some pretty incredible data where they think they've mapped the dieback of red cedar in areas throughout the state, the Northwest, over a series of years. And I encourage you to go and look at this data and maybe see if there's any areas near you. There's also been numerous reports of dieback and sometimes form of news articles or blog posts. But generally, we're seeing an increased concern in this dieback, and it's relatively recent. There's also more information about the dieback on our webpage, foresthealth.org. So I mentioned there's a consensus that we're seeing this dieback, or we think that we're seeing this dieback because of these increased droughts. And, we're wondering if this is a possible kind of indicator of what's going on within our communities as well. And so if we think, for example, if we take a step to the side and we talk about inequities in the urban environment, one resource we can look at or pull out that's really cool is this, and it's provided in this case by this Mapping Inequality project led by this gentleman named Robert Nelson. And we can pull out these maps that are they're maps that were drawn in the 1930s by the homeowner loan corporations that essentially told banks where it was good to invest and where it was not. And so communities in these areas rated D were not likely to get loans from these homeowner corporations. And the legacy of these decisions in the 30s still lives on today. where these communities didn't have the privilege to build the equity that some of these other neighborhoods would have. But more importantly, or more relevant, I should say, is that there's some research and support out there that these areas remain disadvantaged in terms of climate resilience and access to forest resources and the benefits of forests, for example. And so this isn't showing up on my browser, but it probably will on yours. But here we have a page embedded that links you to a story in the New York Times that follows a paper about the redlining and about how this data can be analogous to kind of the surface temperatures that we're seeing in these neighborhoods. And so we're really connecting today's surface temperatures back to these 1930s Home Loan Corporation maps. And sometimes this is referred to as redlining. And so this grade D area, for example, would be considered the areas that were kind of highlighted with red lines in maps, I guess, if you will. And I apologize if I'm getting this slightly wrong. But the general principle is that we suspect these areas are hotter, and these areas don't have the same access to the benefits of urban forests. And because these areas are hotter, and because Western red cedar is more vulnerable to hotter areas, we are interested in testing the hypothesis that that red cedar would be less healthy in these kind of more vulnerable, worse off areas. And so we come back to this question, if Western red cedar is vulnerable to hotter temperatures and historically disadvantaged neighborhoods like the grade D in those Hulk maps are hotter, is Western red cedar less healthy in those areas? So are we going to see more red cedars with this dieback? And one thing we can do now is we can look at some pretty incredible data that the city of Portland and Portland Parks and Rec have put together. And these are these street tree maps where they've mapped all the trees throughout the city. And if we pull out which ones are Western red cedar, and then we color them based on what area they're in, you can see that there's, for example, there's Western red cedar throughout the city. And we can look at something that's also pretty neat is that the city of Portland actually has rated the health of these trees. So you can kind of look at which ones are rated poor, fair, or good in these different areas. And you kind of see this picture unfold. And so the question remains, can we, is Western red cedar an indicator or a symbol for the inequities in the environments? Does Western red cedar need more help in these areas that are rated D or grade D in the Hulk area maps? Is it more vulnerable to climate change? Are these communities more vulnerable to climate change? These are kind of the questions that we're interested in exploring. And there's opportunities to explore this further. What we've done is you can find a tree near you. You can look on our webpage to see kind of what examples of an unhealthy tree looks like and how you can add an observation to an open project on iNaturalist called the Western Red Cedar Dieback map. So essentially we're asking communities, go to these areas, find this tree, then add an observation on here indicating how healthy the tree is. And together we can test this hypothesis that Western red cedar is less healthy in these historically disadvantaged communities. And again, if you have any other questions, I encourage you to contact us through our webpage or visit our webpage for more information, and feel free to contact us. It's at foresthealth.org. And thanks for joining me.